That time I was reading a book by a guy called Bob Proctor. And that particular morning, I had read about what he was calling the law of compensation. A few years ago, I was doing a business that crumbled. And within a few months, I was in a financial pit. Had no income, and I remember talked to my wife, and we moved from where we used to live, and we went to, at one moment, a single-roomed house. Things were devastating. We lived, that time we were newly married for like 4 or 5 years. Because we didn't have children, we were in a 2-bedroom apartment. We had everything that you would have wanted. But things happened, and we found ourselves living in a one-roomed structure. And we did all manner of businesses then. I had this longing that I wanted to still figure it out in business. I knew there was an easier route, perhaps go get a job. And as good as a job is, because of the security it provides and everything, I didn't feel like that is the route I wanted. So what we did all manner of businesses, but one of the businesses we did, that was the time immediately after the polythene paper bags were banned, and they brought the new carrier bags we now have that are all over. So that time they were new, and I thought it was an ingenious thing, and we began hawking these bags. So I remember I would go buy some bales of those bags in town, bring them to the structure we lived in, and we would divide. We lived in Ruiru, so I would go towards Kasarani. At one moment, I remember I took a matatu that dropped me at Kahawasukari, and I trekked through Kahawasukari, Kahawendani, went to Githurai, walked to Isambu, went to Kasarani, came down to Githurai 44, to Zimmerman, came up to Githurai 45. It took me hours, and by that time I had finished what I had, and I went home, and we did that one for several months. But one thing that I never stopped, even in that very tough predicament, I have always loved reading, so I kept reading. That time I was reading a book by a guy called Bob Proctor. And that particular morning, I had read about what he was calling the law of compensation. So I read, it was very interesting, but when time came, dropped what I was reading, and I went to do our business. So the business would go and talk to Mama Bogas, and we would request them, we give them the bags they needed, but we convinced them not to pay us that day. They pay us the following time when we are delivering the other consignment. And our thinking was that when we do it like that, we'll always be going to collect what we delivered last time, and we leave them with the new luggage, so that it was a way of locking the customer in. But the trouble was, that business was very simple. Anybody would do it. If you go and we were selling maybe a set of bags at, let's say, 50 shillings, somebody will come, find out how much she bought the previous bags, and she will drop the cost by 5 shillings, and the woman would stop buying from us, would take the new consignment, and when we went, she would give us the money and tell us we found somebody selling these bags in a cheaper way. And that, it was difficult, but we didn't have anything to do. We went on doing it. But one morning, I'll never forget, it was around 10 a.m. That day I've told you about, when I read that book. I'm walking from Githurai to a school that now is no longer there, called it Castemil. I'm around that point, and the thing I had read comes back, and this is what I want to share with you today. It is called the law of compensation. And the law of compensation states that the amount of money you earn is in direct ratio, in direct proportion to the need for what you do, how well you do it, and the difficulty with which there is in being replaced. Think about that. That the amount of money you earn is in direct proportion with the need for what you do, how well you do it, and the difficulty with which there is being replaced. So, back to our story. So I remember when that thing played in my mind, I realized the need for what we were doing that time. We were selling bags. How well would we do it? Apart from perhaps making those papers cheap because they were the same papers that everybody was selling, how well we do it? There's nothing much we do. And the ease with being replaced, somebody simply needed to come and sell them cheaply. And we were off the market. I called my wife and told her, just make sure you collect all the balances you have with your clients. We won't do this business again. And that's what we did. We never did that business again that day. And it was crazy because I didn't have anything to do, but if I believed whatever this principle was, I was violating whatever it taught. And as you know, as well as I do, that principles are principles. You can't break them. They can only break you. So it's like trying to argue with gravity. You jump from top of a building down, trying to argue it, you're going to break your bones and all that. So principles are principles. So I was like, we are breaking this principle, we'll stop breaking this. And we stopped. The rest is history. Many things were to happen. And today, we now run a relatively successful technology company. We've been doing it for the last 5 years. So I've given you that story so that you understand the impact or how this thing sank in me, the law of compensation. Think about it. If you can, just write it somewhere and read. Well, it may not make sense the first time, but read and reread. If it makes sense, please comment down there and let's see whether we agree, or if you disagree, that's okay. Let's discuss. Thank you.